I got a call, and lo and behold, I knew of Savannah from her father because we played football at Central together. I'd known him for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And so they gave me a call, came in the office. I had no idea what this would be about. I knew of Savannah, but this was the first time I had met her. Her brother, who was here in the courtroom today, her mother, who was in the courtroom today, and her father. We all met in my office, and she was in hysterics. It's only 4 days after.
Something is wrong. I just came into our room, and he isn't moving. The words cracked through a monitored phone line, a frantic attempt to establish an alibi before investigators could look closer. A few states away, a single, 4-letter digital message, simply reading "Go," instantly sealed a husband's fate on a quiet evening. And in a secured corporate dark zone, a shadow stood motionless over a restricted utility area for exactly 28 minutes, leaving a vulnerable child completely exposed to the elements before turning around to walk away into the midnight rain. These are not the calculated plots of criminal syndicates or faceless drifters. These are the final unresolved windows of victims who looked up and saw a familiar, trusted face standing over them. They smiled for news cameras, authored books on the agonizing journey of grief, and stood on court steps proclaiming their innocence, looking the public dead in the eye while masking an absolute breakdown of trust. Welcome to the invisible evidence. Before we pull back the curtain on these cases, we must issue a clear advisory. The investigative files and courtroom revelations we are uncovering today contain highly sensitive case timelines, serious legal trials, and profound interpersonal betrayals. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. To our incredible community of true crime analysts who have been with us through thick and thin, thank you. Your shares, your likes, and your thoughtful insights in the comments are the lifeblood of this channel. You don't just watch. You help us spread vital public safety awareness for these cases, ensuring that the names of the individuals are never erased. If you are joining our circle for the very first time today, hit that subscribe button to join our global investigative network. By supporting fact-driven, educational media, you help ensure that complex forensic breakdowns and policy updates remain visible in the public eye. Drop a comment below right now letting us know exactly what city, state, or country you are watching from. Let's map out where the search for justice is reaching today. Now, we step directly into the heart of the deception, where the cameras were rolling, the lies were thriving, and the clock was ticking down to zero. Our investigation begins in the mountain community of Francis, Utah. On the morning of March 4, 2022, a state emergency dispatcher logged a call at exactly 3:21 a.m. The caller was Curry Richens. She reported that she had been sleeping in an adjacent room with one of her children, and upon returning to the primary bedroom, she discovered her husband, 39-year-old Eric Richens, completely unresponsive. Eric was the co-owner of a highly successful regional stonemasonry firm and a father to 3 young boys. First responders arrived quickly, but standard life support measures were entirely unsuccessful. Because Eric Richens was young and had no prior history of chronic illness or medical instability, the medical examiner ordered an immediate comprehensive toxicology panel. The eventual return of that report altered the legal trajectory of the case. Forensic toxicologists verified that Eric's system contained 5 times the lethal threshold of illicit fentanyl. It was a massive, concentrated oral ingestion, ruling out accidental environmental exposure. As the Summit County Sheriff's Department and state investigators scrutinized the months leading up to the incident, a clear pattern of behavioral and financial anomalies emerged. The data revealed that on February 14, 2022, exactly 3 weeks prior to his passing, Eric had experienced a sudden, life-threatening medical crisis immediately after consuming a private dinner prepared by his wife. He suffered severe breathing issues and broke out in hives, prompting him to privately text family members, stating that he believed his wife was attempting to make him ill. A comprehensive forensic audit of the household bank accounts and commercial assets exposed the underlying motive. Corey Richens had quietly accumulated over $2 million in fraudulent debt tied to speculative real estate acquisitions that she had hidden from her husband. Eric had recently uncovered these liabilities, removed her name from his asset distribution directives, and set up an appointment with a local family law attorney to initiate divorce proceedings. The timeline following the incident drew intense scrutiny toward the psychological depth of the cover-up. In March 2023, precisely 1 year after Eric's passing, Corey published a specialized children's book detailing the mourning process, titled Are You With Me? The publication featured an idealized depiction of a father offering guidance from a spiritual plane. She engaged in a heavy regional media tour, appearing on television networks to provide strategies on navigating family loss, insulating herself from local suspicion while the underlying digital and financial data was being systematically processed by detectives. Law enforcement executed a formal arrest warrant in May 2023 after tracking cash transactions and text logs between Corey and her household housekeeper to acquire the illicit substances. During the legal proceedings in March 2026, the prosecution bypassed emotional arguments, presenting a clinical sequence of cell tower data, bank ledger records, and tracking logs. The jury required less than 3 hours of deliberation to return a unanimous guilty verdict on all counts. On May 13, 2026, a Utah judge sentenced Corey Richens to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Case 2. The focus shifts to North Bend, Oregon, where the intersection of a complex custody dispute and international financial tracking exposed deep vulnerabilities in border-crossing security protocols. On August 2, 2021, an emergency call signaled a residential security breach. Dr. Craig Jackson, a practicing clinic physician and a United States Navy veteran, was fatally targeted inside his home. His second wife, Amy Jackson, jolted awake by the intrusion, managed to hide beneath the framework of the bed, remaining unseen by the individuals who entered the premises. Dr. Jackson did not survive the encounter. Detectives immediately initiated a behavioral assessment of the family structure, uncovering a highly volatile background. Dr. Jackson held sole physical custody of his minor daughter, Isabella Jackson, following a year-long legal battle with his ex-wife, Raina Gabriella Jackson. Forensic financial audits quickly established a critical timeline. Raina's $5,000 monthly spousal support agreement was on the verge of legal termination. Furthermore, county court files revealed that Raina had previously been convicted of first-degree burglary after breaking into Dr. Jackson's residence during a prior domestic dispute, providing investigators with a clear pattern of behavioral escalation. In the days immediately following the incident, a financial anomaly triggered an automated banking alert. A forged check totaling $40,000 cleared Dr. Jackson's personal account, bearing an electronic signature that did not match his historical handwriting files. Simultaneously, school enrollment logs verified that Raina had abruptly withdrawn Isabella from her educational institution without legal authorization. Using the unapproved $40,000, Raina crossed the international border, fleeing deep into Guatemala to acquire land and construct a completely new identity under an assumed name. For nearly 2 years, Raina successfully navigated gaps in interjurisdictional tracking systems. However, federal intelligence agencies maintained continuous monitoring of known associate communication channels. On June 10, 2023, digital anomalies flagged Raina's location as she attempted to transit through an international airport in Atlanta. Federal agents intercepted her on the tarmac, executing the outstanding warrants. During the trial in Coos County, Oregon, prosecutors presented a clinical case file centered on digital and physical evidence, including a hand-drawn logistical map of Dr. Jackson's residence recovered from Raina's vehicle. On April 24, 2026, the jury returned a verdict of guilty for second-degree murder. 1 week later, in May 2026, a state judge sentenced Raina Jackson to life imprisonment with a mandatory minimum of 25 years before any consideration for parole eligibility. Case 3. The investigation moves to Schenectady, New York, where an evaluation of commercial infrastructure boundaries and emergency monitoring systems exposed critical gaps in child safety tracking. The timeline began on Friday evening, March 8, 2024. Persia Nelson attended a private social gathering where internal records later verified she consumed alcohol and controlled substances. Following a severe interpersonal dispute, Nelson left the venue into a night marked by freezing rain and temperatures dropping into the mid-30s. With her was her 11-month-old daughter, Halo Branton, who was wrapped only in a light blanket. During the early morning hours of March 9, 2024, Nelson wandered away from residential streets and approached the high-security perimeter of the General Electric campus. Security logs and digital data later confirmed that she bypassed physical fencing structures to gain unauthorized access to the restricted industrial grounds. Internal surveillance cameras captured a precise timeline. Nelson approached an unlit utility drainage structure, stood over the location for exactly 28 minutes, left the child inside the open pipe, and walked away from the sector alone without notifying any facility personnel or emergency networks. By Saturday evening, March 9th, extended family members noticed the prolonged absence and formally initiated a missing person report, prompting a multi-agency regional search. On the morning of March 10, 2024, facility security personnel discovered Nelson wandering aimlessly on a secure section of the corporate campus, claiming total amnesia regarding her location and the whereabouts of her child. Armed with facility access data, investigators localized the search and discovered Halo Branton submerged in freezing water inside the industrial drainage pipe. An expedited autopsy report verified that the cause of death was acute exposure and severe hypothermia. The subsequent legal proceedings in October 2025 focused heavily on the psychological framework of depraved indifference. The defense argued that acute substance intoxication caused severe cognitive disorientation, meaning there was no deliberate intent to cause harm. The prosecution countered this narrative by presenting synchronized digital video evidence, specifically focusing on the 28 minutes Nelson stood motionless at the site before departing. The jury rejected the defense's position, returning a guilty verdict on all charges, including second-degree murder. On February 2, 2026, Judge Matthew Snitker handed down the absolute statutory maximum sentence, ordering Persia Nelson to serve 25 years to life in a state correctional facility. Case 4. The focus turns to Henderson, Nevada, where a complex matrix of domestic realignment and hidden behavioral volatility exposed severe gaps in how family courts monitor high-risk households. On August 6, 2023, 46-year-old entrepreneur Jonathan Willett was inside a downstairs bedroom at his mother's residence. Jonathan had recently established a stable trajectory, having just been awarded full legal custody of his 2 young daughters, and was preparing to relocate his family to ensure domestic stability. He never completed the transition. On the morning of August 7, 2023, Jonathan's mother entered the room to check on his welfare and immediately encountered a highly altered crime scene. Forensic investigators arrived to find that industrial chemicals, including bleach and ammonia, had been poured extensively over the bedding area to mask physical evidence. Jonathan had been fatally assaulted while face down, and vital structural elements of his remains were missing from the scene. Detectives immediately initiated electronic and vehicular tracking protocols centered on his ex-wife, Devin Michaels. Automated license plate readers and GPS telemetry reconstructed a highly precise timeline from the night of the incident. Devin's Armada SUV was tracked navigating the Las Vegas Valley to a retail drive-thru at 2:28 a.m., directly coordinating with the hours of the incident. A search warrant executed at her Northwest residence uncovered critical physical data. Jonathan's blood-stained mobile device was recovered from her vehicle. His official Social Security card was found inside her purse, and his personal wallet was concealed within her private wardrobe. Investigators later established that she had transported and discarded vital evidence inside a residential sanitation container, which was cleared by municipal collection services before land audits could be performed. The behavioral analysis exposed a deeply convoluted domestic dynamic. Devin was simultaneously attempting to navigate a divorce from Jonathan's son, her current husband, with whom she had initiated a relationship when he was a teenager. When family court custody determinations turned in Jonathan's favor, prompting his plan to return to the shared property, Devin deployed lethal force to prevent the relocation. Devin initially entered a second-degree murder plea, but caused a massive disruption during a July 2025 hearing by attempting to visually withdraw her statement, forcing the case to a full trial in November 2025. The prosecution presented an undeniable sequence of digital footprints, vehicle tracking logs, and recovered personal assets. The jury rejected the defense's alternate theories, returning a verdict of first-degree murder. On January 8, 2026, Devin Michaels was sentenced to 28 years to life in a Nevada state prison. Case 5. The timeline shifts to Bayshore, New York, where an analysis of localized street dynamics and municipal surveillance integration exposed how rapidly an arbitrary encounter can escalate within unmonitored suburban corridors. On the night of September 17, 2022, 29-year-old Linver Ortiz-Pon pulled his red Chevrolet Camaro onto Fifth Avenue and fell asleep at the wheel. He was a complete stranger to the neighborhood, but his vehicle happened to be positioned directly in front of the residence of Kayla Alvarenga. Insisting that the vehicle be removed, Alvarenga confronted the driver, but he remained inside the car and fell back asleep. Rather than contacting municipal authorities, Alvarenga utilized her mobile device to activate a highly structured local street syndicate, known by the operational acronym Family Over Everything, Everybody Killed. Investigators tracking the digital timeline established that 4 syndicate members mobilized immediately, arriving at the coordinates in a stolen luxury vehicle. Commercial gas station surveillance streams and residential security feeds captured the next phase of the conspiracy. The group intercepted the vehicle, extracted Linver by force, and took control of the Camaro. When the victim attempted to escape by running toward a nearby commercial fueling station to seek concealment behind parked vehicles, Alvarenga issued a direct digital directive to her associates to locate and neutralize him. High-definition surveillance cameras at the fueling station documented the syndicate surrounding the victim at gunpoint and forcing him into the secondary vehicle. The data tracked both cars navigating to a nearby church parking lot, where a physical assault occurred. On Alvarenga's explicit verbal command, lethal force was deployed. The group split the cash assets recovered from the victim's wallet before leaving the scene. The subsequent investigation relied heavily on the synthesis of automated license plate readers, geofence data, and digital video synchronization to dismantle the coordinate-based conspiracy. By tracking the exact digital footprints of the stolen luxury vehicle and the victim's Camaro, Suffolk County detectives linked Alvarenga directly to the coordination and execution of the operation. At trial, the state presented a highly technical, fact-driven case file that mapped the cellular communications and video evidence with absolute precision. On March 26, 2026, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, finding Kayla Alvarenga guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, and conspiracy. On April 28, 2026, she received a definitive sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Case 6. The investigation moves to Herndon, Virginia, where a deep dive into digital footprint analysis and network forensic metadata exposed how specialized online spaces can be leveraged to mask a highly calculated domestic plot. The origins of the conspiracy dated back to late 2022. Brendan Banfield, an IRS criminal investigator trained in advanced forensic tracking, had entered into an illicit relationship with his family's 25-year-old international care provider, Juliana Paris Magalhães, a Brazilian au pair hired to assist in the household. Desiring to restructure their living arrangement without the significant financial reallocations of a divorce proceeding, the pair began formulating an operational strategy to eliminate Brendan's wife, 37-year-old pediatric intensive care nurse Christine Banfield. Utilizing their understanding of digital anonymity, the co-conspirators accessed a specialized adult web portal to establish a deceptive profile using Christine's identity. Over several weeks, they utilized this platform to solicit an unsuspecting third party, ultimately targeting 39-year-old Joseph Ryan, a local dog rescue advocate with no prior connection to the family. Through precise digital coordination, they lured Ryan to the Banfield residence on the morning of February 24, 2023, under the false pretense of a voluntary encounter. When Ryan entered the upper level of the home, the pre-planned operational trap was executed. Christine Banfield was subjected to a severe physical assault involving sharp instruments, while Joseph Ryan was fatally targeted with a firearm. Immediately following the incident, both Brendan and Juliana placed synchronized emergency calls to 911, presenting a meticulous self-defense narrative. They stated to arriving officers that an unknown intruder had breached the perimeter and assaulted Christine, forcing them to deploy defensive lethal force. The initial investigation encountered zero signs of forced entry or structural compromise, prompting Fairfax County detectives to initiate a deep tissue extraction of all local digital devices, network routers, and communication metadata. The forensic digital analysis completely dismantled the self-defense claim. Tech forensics extracted the deleted histories of the adult web portal profile, tracing the Internet Protocol addresses directly back to devices controlled exclusively by Brendan and Juliana. Furthermore, cell phone location telemetry and browser metadata proved the pair had physically curated the digital profile during hours they claimed to be detached from Internet access. Faced with the undeniable weight of the data, Juliana Paris Magalhaes accepted a formal cooperation plea agreement, providing detailed testimony regarding the full scope of the conspiracy. On February 2, 2026, the judicial process culminated in a Fairfax County courtroom. Brendan Banfield was convicted on all 4 counts, including 2 counts of aggravated murder, resulting in a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. For her role in the operation and subsequent cooperation, Juliana received the maximum allowable statutory sentence under her specific plea framework, totaling 10 years of confinement. Case 7. The investigation transitions to Americus, Georgia, turning a critical lens towards safety parameters within public higher education housing and the profound necessity of monitoring informal child care arrangements. On the evening of Sunday, January 14, 2024, an 18-month-old child named Romeo Angelus was left under the temporary care of 19-year-old Trinity Madison Pogue inside her residential space at Georgia Southwestern State University. Pogue was a university freshman and a reigning local beauty queen who had recently been crowned Miss Donnelsonville. Romeo was the son of her boyfriend, Julian Williams. According to official witness timelines, a university housing resident observed the child alert and presenting zero indicators of physical distress at approximately 10 p.m. However, within a 90-minute window, the child's physiological state suffered a catastrophic deterioration. Julian Williams rushed his unresponsive son to the emergency department at Phoebe Sumter Medical Center, where medical personnel determined the trauma was irreversible. Romeo Angelus was pronounced deceased later that night. When questioned by responding campus police and county investigators, Pogue claimed the child had sustained injuries from an accidental fall off a standard residential chair. However, a forensic medical evaluation conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation completely invalidated the accidental fall narrative. The autopsy report documented severe intracranial pressure, acute brain bleeding, and a major skull fracture, trauma that experts testified required rapid, high-impact force inconsistent with low-level household furniture contact. The decisive breakthrough in the criminal inquiry emerged from a deep forensic triage of Pogue's digital communications. Investigators extracted an outgoing text message sent by Pogue to her roommate shortly before the emergency event. The digital transmission stated directly, "He hates me and I hate him." Furthermore, a systematic review of housing block witness interviews established a documented pattern of behavioral friction, with neighbors verifying they repeatedly heard the child in distress exclusively during hours he was left unmonitored with Pogue. At trial, the defense attempted to counter the forensic findings by introducing character witnesses who testified to Pogue's prior history of uneventful neighborhood babysitting. Pogue herself exercised her constitutional right to remain silent and did not take the stand. On December 5, 2025, the jury concluded less than 3 hours of deliberation. While they acquitted her on the count of malice murder, they returned a unanimous guilty verdict on the 5 remaining counts, including felony murder and first-degree cruelty to a child. A Georgia judge subsequently sentenced Trinity Madison Pogue to life imprisonment, carrying a statutory mandatory minimum of 30 years of confinement before any potential consideration for parole eligibility. Case 8. The focus shifts to Traer, Iowa, where an investigation inside an isolated agricultural community demonstrated how advanced data forensics can extract evidence from transient digital platforms to dismantle a highly coordinated domestic plot. On the morning of June 18, 2021, Tama County Sheriff's deputies responded to a rural farmhouse location. Upon entering the living room, they discovered 46-year-old Ryan Cooper, a respected local farmer, sitting in his recliner with fatal trauma from 2 closely grouped firearm discharges to the face. His wife, Karina Sue Cooper, was positioned on top of his torso when law enforcement entered the premises, presenting an outward display of severe grief. Karina stated to responding officers that an unknown intruder had breached the home's perimeter while the family slept. However, a physical inspection of the property revealed zero indicators of forced entry, structural compromise, or missing assets. Crime scene technicians recovered a single spent shell casing near the recliner, but the primary asset required to break the case lay hidden within encrypted network server logs. Because the physical evidence at the scene was intentionally obscured, prosecutors later noted that Karina had deliberately rubbed her face into her husband's blood to mask firearm discharge residue on her skin. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation initiated a multi-year forensic audit of transient digital messaging applications. The technological breakthrough centered entirely on a data subpacket recovered from Snapchat. Network forensics proved that on the exact night of the incident, Karina had been engaging in a covert relationship with 28-year-old Houston Danker, a man she had originally met when he visited her home-based barber shop for a haircut. Investigators successfully reconstructed the digital timeline from the encrypted server backups, revealing that at the precise hour of the incident, Karina sent a single-word command to Danker via Snapchat, "Go." While the defense later argued the message was incomplete and simply meant "go to sleep," structural data analysis conducted by digital forensic experts proved it was a standalone operational signal. This single digital footprint directly connected the couple to a premeditated coordination plan to eliminate Ryan Cooper in order to secure the family's farm assets and financial equity. Following an exhaustive 2.5-year digital and financial inquiry, law enforcement officially executed arrest warrants for both parties in February 2024. Faced with the overwhelming weight of the synchronized digital evidence, Houston Danker entered a negotiated guilty plea to first-degree murder just prior to his scheduled trial, agreeing to cooperate with the state. At trial, the prosecution presented the reconstructed Snapchat metadata alongside testimony detailing the financial and interpersonal dynamics of the relationship. On July 11, 2025, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, finding Karina Sue Cooper guilty of first-degree murder. On September 19, 2025, she received the mandatory statutory penalty under Iowa law, resulting in a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Case 9. The timeline moves to Columbia, Missouri, turning a critical analytical lens toward the complete breakdown of unvetted, informal childcare arrangements within long-term social networks. In April 2021, an 8-month-old infant named Hannah Kent was left under the temporary care of 34-year-old Jennifer Johnson. The arrangement was built entirely on a decade of established trust. Johnson was a close, personal friend of the child's mother, Lynetta Hill, and had safely looked after Hill's older children during prior years. This instance, however, marked the first time she was left alone with the infant. According to official medical and police timelines, the infant's older sister observed Johnson handling the child with aggressive force during the evening hours. By the early morning, the infant was unresponsive. Emergency medical staff at the local Women's and Children's Hospital officially confirmed the fatality upon arrival, noting severe bruising and acute brain trauma that medical experts verified was entirely consistent with recent, direct physical assault. As Boone County detectives initiated interrogations, Johnson attempted to establish a firm alibi. She stated to investigators that she last observed the child alive and stable at 2:15 a.m. after providing a bottle, and claimed she slept undisturbed for the remainder of the night. However, an immediate forensic audit of Johnson's cellular data completely demolished her statement. Phone records and network logs proved that throughout those exact overnight hours, Johnson was continuously active, sending a succession of digital messages in an attempt to illicitly obtain controlled substances. Most critically, network metadata revealed that at 9:11 a.m., more than 2 hours before she claimed to have discovered the child's condition or alerted emergency services, Johnson placed a private call to a personal associate and stated plainly that the infant had passed away. The physical evidence further contradicted her timeline. A search of the property uncovered a soaking wet infant onesie hidden deep inside a kitchen pantry. While the child had arrived at the residence wearing the garment, she had been transported to the medical facility wearing only a diaper. Forensic laboratory analysis of Johnson's clothing subsequently tested positive for the victim's blood mixed with infant formula, establishing direct physical contact during the fatal window. Following several years of legal delays, the trial phase commenced in January 2026. Faced with the undeniable alignment of cellular tracking data, intercepted communications, and physical forensics, the defense called 0 witnesses, and Johnson herself exercised her constitutional right not to testify. On February 23, 2026, the judicial process concluded. The jury convicted Jennifer Johnson of second-degree felony murder and 2 counts of child endangerment. A Missouri judge ordered her to serve a sentence of life imprisonment plus 30 consecutive years, ensuring absolute accountability for a profound betrayal of domestic trust. Case 10. The investigation moves to Jacksonville, Florida, where the intersection of unmonitored psychiatric vulnerabilities, precise digital manipulation, and an altered scene exposed deep systemic challenges for regional crisis response teams. The timeline began on July 1, 2025. 21-year-old Journey Denaisha McGrew transmitted a targeted digital message to a family acquaintance, 41-year-old Wadyuta Londrell Woodley. The text communication expressed regret for past interpersonal friction and explicitly invited Woodley to her residence at the Cross Creek apartment complex under the false pretense of a voluntary encounter. Woodley arrived at the apartment location that evening. According to investigative timelines, an internal dispute developed inside the residence during the early morning hours of July 2, 2025. As Woodley prepared to exit the premises near the front entryway, McGrew retrieved a metal utility hammer, concealing it behind her back before executing a sudden physical intervention. Woodley retreated into the external breezeway structure of the building, where the physical confrontation concluded. Rather than alerting emergency medical services or municipal law enforcement immediately, McGrew returned inside her apartment to execute a systematic cleanup sequence. Crime scene technicians later verified she placed the tool inside the bathroom basin, utilized chemical agents to clean the residential flooring, and altered her wardrobe. Most critically, McGrew used a green highlighter to write a highly specific, unsubstantiated message on a loose piece of notebook paper, which she placed directly on Woodley's chest in an attempt to steer the narrative. The written message accused the victim of historical misconduct against children. When Jacksonville Sheriff's officers arrived at the scene later that morning following a generic dispute alert, they discovered Woodley completely unresponsive. Officers ordered McGrew to egress from her apartment. Upon being detained, she spontaneously inquired if Woodley was still functioning, providing detectives with an immediate behavioral indicator. A formal search warrant of the residence completely dismantled the self-defense framework presented during initial interviews. Tech forensics and physical tracking teams mapped a clear path of evidence. Investigators discovered a notebook missing pages that matched the paper left on the victim, the green highlighter used to compose the note, and automated forensic testing identified extensive biological tracking leading straight from the entry portal to her bathroom facilities. Furthermore, background checks verified that Woodley possessed 0 historical or legal records of child misconduct, completely invalidating the justification left at the scene. The case progressed rapidly through the judicial system. In December 2025, Journey McGrew officially altered her initial position, entering a formal plea of guilty to second-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence. The legal proceedings extended into a detailed sentencing phase on April 30, 2026. During her courtroom testimony, McGrew disclosed that she had been previously diagnosed with complex psychiatric conditions, including bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. Most significantly, she revealed a critical systemic gap. She had completely ceased her prescribed medical treatments months prior to the incident due to acute health insurance termination, leading to severe tracking anomalies and unmonitored auditory distortions. Prosecutors countered by documenting a documented historical pattern of McGrew making unverified allegations against multiple family members. The judicial evaluation remains active as the court reviews clinical psychiatric assessments to determine the final statutory confinement parameters. Jacksonville Woman's Courtroom Testimony. This legal broadcast details the official sentencing testimony, psychiatric evaluations, and evidence presentations from the Journey McGrew trial, offering essential contextual depth regarding the breakdown of medical tracking systems in high-risk scenarios. Case 11. The timeline shifts to Tampa, Florida, exploring how open-source intelligence and real-time social media location broadcasting can transform public environments into highly vulnerable target zones. On June 23, 2024, 26-year-old independent musical artist Charles Jones, known professionally as Julio Folio, arrived in the city from Jacksonville to host a public celebration for his birthday. Throughout the evening, Jones broadcasted his precise real-time locations, coordinates, and event updates directly to hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. This digital footprint was actively monitored by a rival faction. Seeking to locate Jones while minimizing their own electronic signatures, members of the opposing group integrated an unmapped asset into their operational plan: 21-year-old Alicia Andrews. Because Andrews was not an official member of the faction and lacked a formal profile with rival local intelligence databases, her mobile device and personal vehicle were deployed as a specialized reconnaissance shield. Investigators tracking the data timeline established that Andrews traveled alongside her boyfriend, Isaiah Chance, and co-defendants Rashad Murphy, Dave Murphy, and Sean Gathright. As Jones updated his public profile to state that local law enforcement had closed down his initial venue, forcing him to relocate to a hotel near the University of South Florida, Andrews acted as a forward scout. Tech forensics later verified her device continuously pinged cell towers directly mirroring Jones' transit route, trailing his vehicle between multiple entertainment venues before localizing on the final hotel perimeter. Once the victim's vehicle entered the parking lot on McKinley Drive, the digital tracking phase ended. 3 masked individuals emerged from the shadows, deploying modified rifles designed to retain spent shell casings inside the mechanism, minimizing physical trace evidence at the scene. Jones did not survive the targeted encounter, and 3 additional bystanders sustained severe physical trauma. The subsequent multi-agency inquiry relied entirely on advanced digital device triage, license plate recognition mapping, and video synchronization. Detectives isolated Andrews' cellular data, proving she had utilized her device to actively communicate the victim's physical vulnerabilities to the execution team. The case proceeded through distinct legal channels due to the variance in criminal intent. While the 4 male co-defendants stood trial together, Andrews' case was handled separately. On May 8, 2026, a Florida jury returned a sweeping verdict for the primary execution team, finding the gunman guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy, resulting in mandatory life sentences. Andrews' legal trajectory concluded shortly thereafter. Her defense team argued she was a secondary asset acting under intense interpersonal compliance, unaware of the lethal nature of the confrontation. However, prosecutors successfully demonstrated that her active mobile tracking was essential to the operation's success. On May 22, 2026, a state judge sentenced Alicia Andrews to 15 years in a state correctional facility following her conviction for manslaughter, establishing a landmark legal precedent regarding accountability for digital spotters in coordinate-based ambushes. Case 12. The investigation turns to Cabazon, California, where a highly coordinated multi-agency response to a reported child abduction exposed how deep device triage and metadata extraction can dismantle an elaborate domestic cover-up. On August 14, 2025, an emergency alert mobilized the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Rebecca Renee Harrow filed a formal police report stating that she had been subjected to a sudden physical assault by an unknown individual while walking along an isolated roadway, claiming the assailant forcibly removed her 7-month-old infant, Emmanuel Harrow, before fleeing the area. Law enforcement immediately deployed tracking K-9 units, aerial surveillance helicopters, and regional specialized search teams to secure the perimeter. However, as patrol officers processed the initial scene, significant behavioral and physical inconsistencies surfaced. Rebecca presented 0 external indicators of a physical struggle, and her detailed description of the event timeline began to shift under preliminary questioning. The investigative pivot occurred when detectives secured a formal warrant for the electronic devices belonging to Rebecca and her husband, Jake Harrow. Digital forensic experts initiated a deep tissue triage of the couple's mobile hardware, targeting localized photographic metadata and encrypted text log subpackets. The electronic footprint completely invalidated the abduction narrative. Tech forensics extracted hidden files documenting severe, ongoing internal domestic abuse patterns directed at the infant within the household. Most critically, the geolocation coordinates and timestamp parameters embedded within the device's historical storage proved the child had been removed from the network long before the hour Rebecca claimed the external roadside assault took place. Faced with the alignment of the digital tracking data, investigators altered their strategy, shifting from a community search operation to a targeted homicide inquiry. On August 22, 2025, exactly 1 week after the false report was filed, law enforcement took both parents into custody. Although extensive search operations utilizing canine detection teams were conducted in adjacent desert terrain, the child's physical remains were not recovered. The resolution of the file proceeded through distinct legal phases as the specific parameters of individual accountability were established. Faced with the definitive tracking evidence compiled by the state, Jake Harrow entered a formal guilty plea to first-degree murder. In November 2025, a California state judge handed down a definitive sentence, ordering him to serve 25 years to life in a state correctional facility. Rebecca Harrow initially maintained an alternate defense, but her legal position shifted as prosecutors finalized the case files for a full trial. On May 29, 2026, the judicial process concluded in a Riverside County courtroom. To avoid a complex trial, Rebecca entered a negotiated guilty plea to child endangerment, involuntary manslaughter, and acting as an accessory after the fact. The presiding jurist accepted the terms, establishing absolute legal accountability for her role in the fabrication and the failure of protective oversight. Case 13. The focus transitions to Crown Heights, Brooklyn, exploring the extreme psychological anomalies of targeted violence within generational social frameworks and the interstate tracking capabilities of federal law enforcement. The timeline initiated on the evening of August 4, 2021. 42-year-old Delia Johnson was standing among a group of acquaintances on Franklin Avenue, attending a public candle-lighting outdoor gathering following the funeral service of a mutual associate. Surveillance footage captured the precise logistical mechanics of the incident. A white Mercedes vehicle double-parked along the perimeter. A female figure clad in dark garments emerged from the vehicle, approached Johnson from behind without signaling any behavioral hostility, and deployed an unmapped firearm at point-blank range before navigating back to the vehicle and exiting the sector. Due to initial erroneous witness assertions claiming the operator was a male, municipal patrol officers briefly stopped the vehicle blocks away but permitted the operator to proceed without detention, providing an immediate operational window for flight. The ensuing multi-agency inquiry exposed an absolute absence of historical or digital red flags. The perpetrator was identified as 42-year-old Claudia Banton. Behavioral mapping established that Banton and Johnson had been intimate childhood friends, with Johnson's family having provided Banton with housing, resources, and domestic support over multiple decades. There were zero documented threats, legal filings, or active disputes between the two individuals, presenting a profound challenge for structural violence prediction models. To evade localized apprehending networks, Banton altered her physical characteristics, utilizing specialized wigs, completely deleting her digital footprint across all prominent social media platforms, and traveling south across state lines. The New York Police Department localized the tracking protocol by routing the file to the United States Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force. Federal analysts deployed advanced network tracking, monitoring physical transit lines, and localized associate communication hubs. On November 8, 2021, the task force successfully localized Banton at a commercial address on North Main Street in Jacksonville, Florida, executing the warrant without incident. The legal proceedings in the Brooklyn Supreme Court culminated in April 2025. Throughout the trial phase, the state presented synchronized high-definition video data, but the underlying psychological motive remained entirely unestablished, as Banton maintained absolute silence regarding her internal intent. On April 3, 2025, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty for second-degree murder and criminal possession of a weapon. On May 19, 2025, the presiding jurist ordered Claudia Banton to serve a definitive sentence of 23 years to life in a state correctional facility. Case 14. The investigation shifts to Albuquerque, New Mexico, focusing on the dark intersection of online behavioral grooming, digital manipulation, and the exploitation of severe psychiatric vulnerabilities within unmonitored digital networks. The timeline began in the autumn of 2022. Kiera McCulley, a young woman navigating profound mental health struggles and isolation, became deeply embedded in an online messaging network. Within this space, she fell under the absolute operational control of 26-year-old Isaac Apodaca, who operated online under the highly stylized, fictional persona of an underground syndicate figure known simply as Ghost. Over several weeks, Apodaca utilized advanced behavioral grooming techniques, isolating McCulley from her physical support systems and systematically manipulating her perceptions. He fabricated an elaborate digital narrative, convincing her that a local resident, 65-year-old Grace Jennings, represented an immediate, existential threat to the online community's safety. On October 28, 2022, the psychological grooming culminated in a direct directive. Apodaca ordered McCulley to neutralize Jennings to maintain order within the digital network. The conspiracy moved to the physical plane on the morning of October 29, 2022. McCulley bypassed the exterior boundaries of Jennings' residential property on extracellular coordinates. She gained unauthorized access to the interior structure and executed a sudden physical assault utilizing sharp utility instruments. Jennings did not survive the encounter. Following the incident, McCulley did not attempt to extract physical assets from the home. Instead, her immediate actions were entirely digital, as she transmitted real-time confirmation metrics back to Apodaca to verify the task's completion. Albuquerque Police Department detectives quickly localized the inquiry after discovering zero indicators of a standard robbery or forced entry footprint. The critical breakthrough emerged during a deep forensic triage of McCulley's mobile hardware and personal computer. Cyber forensics extracted thousands of encrypted chat logs, tracing the operational directives directly back to Internet Protocol addresses registered under Apodaca's physical jurisdiction. The metadata exposed a terrifying reality. The entire Ghost Syndicate was an absolute illusion created by Apodaca to radicalize and weaponize vulnerable individuals online. The subsequent legal proceedings focused heavily on the mechanics of digital manipulation. While McCulley was the physical actor at the scene, forensic psychiatrists testified that her cognitive reality had been completely overridden by the sophisticated grooming process. In February 2025, the judicial phase concluded in a New Mexico district court. Kiera McCulley entered a formal plea to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 15 years of confinement, with the court ordering her placement in a specialized facility equipped for intensive psychiatric oversight. Simultaneously, Isaac Apodaca was prosecuted under strict conspiracy and digital solicitation frameworks, receiving a definitive statutory maximum sentence of 35 years in a federal correctional facility for orchestrating the operation from behind a computer screen. Case 15. The investigation moves to Albany, Georgia, examining the volatile crowd dynamics of public venues and the stringent legal definitions of intent when a lethal device is deployed within a densely populated space. The timeline began on the evening of June 5, 2021. A large gathering of local residents had assembled at a commercial block off North Davis Street to participate in a neighborhood block party and outdoor celebration. According to municipal surveillance feeds and witness statements, an interpersonal verbal dispute materialized within the crowd between 26-year-old Keandra Mule Walker and an acquaintance, Shantika Bush. The initial verbal friction centered on localized social disagreements, but the situation rapidly transitioned from a standard dispute into an active perimeter crisis. As bystanders attempted to physically intervene and de-escalate the vocal argument, Walker retreated to a parked vehicle to alter her position. Surveillance tracking logged Walker retrieving a hidden firearm from the vehicle's interior before returning to the active zone of the gathering. Rather than targeting a single individual from a distance, Walker stepped directly into the dense gathering of bystanders and discharged multiple rounds into the immediate crowd layout. 21-year-old Makilia Bush, who was standing nearby as a non-conflicted participant, sustained direct trauma. Emergency medical services transported the victim to Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital, but she did not survive the injury window. The subsequent police inquiry focused on isolating Walker's cellular data and analyzing local high-definition video frames to address the complex legal question of transferred intent. The defense later argued during trial phases that Walker lacked a specific premeditated plan directed at Makilia Bush, claiming the chaotic crowd movement and sudden physical panic caused the weapon to discharge indiscriminately without deliberate individual malice. However, state prosecutors systematically countered this narrative under Georgia's established legal frameworks governing public space violence. The prosecution demonstrated that the conscious act of retrieving a lethal device, walking back into a highly populated perimeter, and pulling the trigger multiple times constitutes a complete disregard for human safety, meaning the legal definition of intent applies to anyone within the zone of danger. Following a detailed trial, the jury rejected the defense's arguments of accidental discharge. The legal trajectory concluded with an extensive appellate review, culminating in April 2025. The Georgia Court of Appeals formally affirmed the initial trial court's judicial determinations, upholding Keandra Mule Walker's conviction for felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, resulting in an absolute sentence of life imprisonment. Case 16. The investigation moves to Pleasant Point, Maine, focusing a critical lens on the admissibility of complex forensic methodologies and the evolving legal frameworks designed to govern scientific evidence in modern courtrooms. The timeline initiated on the evening of April 21, 2022. Samuel Neptune Jr. entered a residence on Thunder Road to check on his sister, 43-year-old Kimberly Neptune. Upon entering the apartment, he discovered her completely unresponsive, presenting extensive physical trauma. Forensic medical examiners later verified that the victim had sustained nearly 500 localized lacerations across her body, signaling a severe, prolonged physical intervention. State detectives immediately focused their behavioral assessment on the victim's close interpersonal circle, localizing on 27-year-old Kaylee Brackett. Investigators established a clear pattern of verbal friction leading up to the incident. Witnesses testified they overheard Brackett stating that Neptune had misappropriated financial resources and would face consequences. Furthermore, digital transactional data proved that shortly after the timeline of the incident, Brackett utilized the victim's financial cards to execute 2 separate automated bank withdrawals totaling $700 in a nearby municipality. While the circumstantial data and financial tracking provided a clear motive centered on interpersonal retaliation, the physical crime scene presented 0 distinct fingerprints or direct biological traces linking Brackett to the interior space. To bridge this forensic gap, the prosecution integrated an unmapped evidentiary asset during the initial December 2023 jury trial, an independent podiatrist who specialized in forensic footprint identification. The specialist analyzed high-definition imagery of partial, bloody, sock-clad footprints recovered from the flooring of the apartment, comparing them to sample prints taken from Brackett while she was in state custody. The expert testified to the jury that there was a moderate level of structural support indicating Brackett left the footprints at the scene. Backed by this testimony, the prosecution asserted during closing arguments that the prints matched with absolute scientific certainty. In May 2024, following a sweeping conviction, a state judge sentenced Brackett to 55 years of confinement. However, the file underwent a profound structural realignment on February 5, 2026. The Maine Supreme Judicial Court issued a landmark 42-page appellate opinion that completely vacated Kaylee Brackett's murder conviction, ordering an immediate cessation of the initial judgment. The High Court's ruling focused entirely on the gatekeeping parameters of the criminal justice system. The justices determined that the trial court erred by admitting the footprint comparison testimony, labeling the specific framework of forensic podiatry as an unverified and highly debatable discipline that lacks recognition from prominent national forensic organizations. The appellate analysis noted that the expert's methodology completely failed to account for variations in sock thickness, fiber composition, or changes in the appellant's physical weight between the date of the incident and her detention tracking. By mischaracterizing a subjective partial print comparison as an absolute scientific match, the prosecution had introduced severe procedural error that compromised the structural integrity of the trial. While the state retains the legal architecture to initiate a secondary trial based on the remaining financial and circumstantial footprints, the landmark 2026 ruling stands as an essential case study on the critical need to purge unverified methodologies from modern judicial proceedings. Case 17. The investigation moves to Flint, Michigan, exploring how a milestone event can dissolve into an immediate crisis and analyzing the swift legal standards applied to bystanders who fail to act after an incident occurs. The timeline initiated on August 30th, 2024. 24-year-old James Shira and 23-year-old Savannah Collier were married earlier that afternoon, with the family celebration transitioning to a residential location in Genesee County later that evening. According to localized surveillance data and witness files, an alcohol-fueled interpersonal argument materialized in an adjacent alleyway between the newly wedded groom and his 29-year-old best man, Terry Lewis Taylor Jr. The initial vocal argument appeared to subside when Shira walked away from the encounter and entered a large utility vehicle. However, the operational tracking timeline shows that exactly 1 minute later, Shira redirected the SUV back toward the alleyway perimeter, accelerated the vehicle to a high rate of speed, and directly struck Taylor before exiting the sector entirely without stopping. The investigative focus quickly expanded from the primary driver to the passenger seat. Savannah Collier was inside the vehicle during the acceleration event and observed the immediate physical impact. Despite possessing an active cellular device, Collier did not notify regional emergency medical services, contact municipal authorities, or attempt to secure any form of stabilizing assistance for the victim lying in the street. Instead, she remained with her husband as he fled the immediate geographic area, avoiding law enforcement tracking until the following day when both parties surrendered to authorities. The subsequent prosecution prioritized the legal definition of accessory accountability. While state investigators conceded that Collier played zero active role in the initial vehicular deployment, prosecutors established that her absolute failure to deploy emergency resources transformed her legal status from a nonviolent bystander into an active participant in a criminal cover-up. The judicial resolutions concluded over 2 distinct phases in May 2026. On May 11, 2026, James Shira entered a no-contest plea to second-degree homicide and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Judge Kari Hannibal sentenced Shira to 30 to 45 years in a state correctional facility. 2 weeks later, on May 26, 2026, Savannah Collier appeared in the same Genesee County courtroom to address her charge of accessory after the fact to a felony. Her defense team highlighted her lack of a prior record and immediate compliance upon turning herself in. Taking her age and systemic compliance into account, Judge Hannibal placed Collier on 24 months of formal probation under the state's Homes Youthful Trainee Act. This specialized legal framework ensures that if she completes the 2-year monitoring window with 0 behavioral infractions, the felony conviction will be completely expunged from her permanent record, serving as an educational legal precedent on the absolute mandate for personal accountability in the presence of an emergency. As we look back across these 17 case files, a striking realization emerges. The most dangerous threats often do not come from the outside world, but from within our most trusted circles. Each chapter has revealed that long before an incident occurs, an underlying trail of digital and financial footprints is already being formed. From unauthorized estate changes and hidden debts to encrypted communications and real-time location tags, the data consistently tells a story of intent well before a boundary is breached. The true lesson of modern forensics is that we must move away from standard true crime formulas that focus only on shock value. Instead, we must focus on systemic awareness. True safety relies on keeping close track of financial records, practicing secure digital habits, and maintaining absolute institutional transparency. By understanding these warning signs, we can identify anomalies before they escalate into an unmanageable crisis. Public safety awareness is not a passive activity. It requires an active understanding of the behavioral and digital footprints left in our everyday lives. We want to express our deepest gratitude to our global community of true crime analysts. Your commitment to fact-driven, educational media is what keeps this platform running. Instead of focusing on emotional reactions, we encourage you to join the conversation below with a focus on predictive prevention. Share your analytical thoughts on how we can improve our digital tracking, enhance community support systems, and close the jurisdictional gaps highlighted today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it to keep these vital forensic breakdowns visible to the public. Thank you for watching The Invisible Evidence. Stay alert, stay analytical, and look out for one another.